Welcome to Sports Ophthalmology, a podcast for ophthalmologists and trainees interested in providing eye care to athletes. I am your host, Jared Tuttle. Join me as we hear from national leaders in this exciting subfield of ophthalmology. Dr. Michael Yen is an oculoplastic surgeon and current Sarah Campbell Blaffer Chair in ophthalmology at the Cullen Eye Institute at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. Dr. Yen attended medical school at the University of Michigan and completed his residency at the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute in Miami, followed by a fellowship in ophthalmic and facial plastic surgery with Dr. Richard Anderson in Salt Lake City. Dr. Yen is a team ophthalmologist for the Houston Rockets in the NBA. Dr. Cotter completed his Doctorate of Medicine at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. After an internship with Letterman Army Medical Center in San Francisco, he returned to Washington, D.C. to complete his residency at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. He also completed 2 fellowships with a focus on glaucoma at the University of Virginia and the Medical College of Virginia. All right, Dr. Yen, Dr. Cotter, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So let's start off with Dr. Yen. How did you get involved with sports ophthalmology?
Actually, in our department here at Baylor College of Medicine, for many years, our ophthalmologists, our faculty have been covering the sports teams here in Houston. So that was kind of an easy way to get involved. And since 2017, I've been sharing the coverage for our Houston Rockets here.
Got it. And I mean, just reading on the research literature, you've been able to publish some things with that work there too. Is that something that you've always kind of wanted to do, or just kind of as you got involved, you've seen different areas and opportunities for questions to get answered?
You know, for sure, I think it's an opportunity because when we look at sports injuries, especially in basketball, we know that eye injuries in sports, basketball is the most common cause for eye injuries in sports. And there just wasn't very much out there in the literature. So we wanted to kind of characterize what the injury pattern was for players that are at the elite level in the professional ranks.
Right. I mean, I feel like there's not too many people doing that work. So thank you for doing it because I've been able to learn from it. So thank you.
Yeah, very interesting to see, you know, that eye injuries are pretty common, even at this elite level. It's not uncommon.
Dr. Cotter, do you mind describing your background in sports?
Yeah, I'm a glaucoma specialist, but I cover call for a very busy level 1 trauma center. So all the trauma that comes in winds up in our practice. A lot of it winds up to me because I don't travel. The guys that travel don't take day calls, so I get all these injuries. And I've had several basketball related injuries over the last few years. Last year I had a conjunctival laceration where I had to sew the conjunctiva back up. That I thought was probably from a nail, definitely from a finger, probably from a nail that did that. And and really my interest in this, besides just seeing a lot of basketball injuries over the years, was I was flipping the channels last year and watched one of the WNBA games, and I saw Caitlin Clark get a nail in her eye, and they showed a close up of the fingernails on the player that hit her, and they were very elongated. I mean, dramatically so. And I just remember thinking to myself, this doesn't seem right. I mean, there's a lot of adults around who are seemingly really smart, and they're just watching this and not saying or doing anything. And so I just assumed that somebody somewhere would see this and take action. And after a few months, nothing happened. And so I said, if no one else is going to do it, I think I'm going to try to get this started. And I contacted the people at the American Society of Ophthalmic Trauma and wrote, a couple of texts outlining, my thesis or why something needed to be done. And they were extremely responsive and very helpful. I mean, there's a treasure trove of information and background, and the articles and journals have been written, and they have a lot of experience. And so they between, me and their expertise, we were able to cobble together a plan to try to bring some awareness to this. Yeah, so we came out with a position paper and some press releases, and we're going to set up a car with the American Academy of Ophthalmology and try to push this issue forward.
Do you mind like describing what a CAR is for listeners that might not be as familiar?
I'll let Michael go. And Michael, you've done it before. Why don't you give a little more detail, Michael?
Well, I think a CAR is just a resolution that is introduced to the council at the American Academy of Ophthalmology for them to consider. If it's approved by the Board of Trustees, it's an official statement from the American Academy of Ophthalmology, which I think carries a lot of weight. So there's a lot of value in trying to get a large organization such as the American Academy of Ophthalmology behind an initiative like this.
And Dr. Cotter, as far as taking this by the reins and just kind of going for it, is there any other reasons for motivation?
I think the other motivation for me is a frustration that there's been a couple of articles written that are published by the Academy of Ophthalmology that recognize the high incidence of injuries of eye injuries with basketball, mainly attributable to fingers, and the frustration comes in the recommendations. The recommendation is always, well, we need to wear eye protection. You know, protection in sports has evolved over the years. I mean, football, they used to not wear helmets, and that evolved in the 40s and 50s to wearing helmets. In baseball, they used to wear the soft caps up until the 50s, and then they started to wear hard helmets, and then they're protecting the face more. So throughout several sports, there's been an evolution of safety as long as it didn't compromise performance. And in basketball, the players just have never thought that the benefit of the eye protection outweighs the risk. I mean, there's risk inherent in all sports, especially contact sports, and everybody who plays those sports accepts that risk. And I think that it's been well established, despite all these recommendations, that basketball players are not going to accept eye protection to prevent eye injuries. They don't see the benefit outweighing the risk. However, that's why I think that's what really got me excited about this initiative, because this isn't sacrificing performance. This is choosing safety over fashion. And I think when the choice is safety over fashion, there needs to be some adults, some people who actually care about, people's health and eyes that step in. And I don't really, I mean, I care about the WNBA players, but I care a lot more about the people at the junior levels, the high school, great middle school, high school. They look up to these players. And if they're running around the court with these 3-inch nails, I guarantee you're going to see it at the lower levels. And we're going to be the ones taking care of that trauma. So I think it would be a really nice gesture to see, the commissioners of the WNBA, the NBA, and NCAA men's step forward and say, this is ridiculous. We're going to have rules surrounding fingernail length. I mean, they do it in wrestling, they do it in water polo, and women's basketball. NCAA women's basketball has a rule about fingernail length. If so, there's, it's a well-established safety regulation to control nail length. And why on earth? So not are they not only controlling nail length, but they're exaggerating nail length. I mean, it's almost like they're putting these claws in their fingers that are just accentuating the danger. And I don't know. I think that. I think this is an initiative, unlike the recommendations the AAO had about goggles and protective wear. I think this is an initiative that is going to meet with success. And it's going to make a statement that, yeah, okay, there are times that authorities like the AAO can step in, American Society of Ophthalmic Trauma can step in and make recommendations that are adhered to, that are sensible. So that's a long-winded explanation as to what my motivation is.
No, that's helpful. Dr. Yen, do you have anything to chime in here?
Well, I would agree that the recommendations for wearing protective eyewear has always been the traditional recommendation from ophthalmologists or eye care practitioners. But it's just not going to be accepted because when you have players that are, when there's a lot of money on the line, they can't sacrifice performance, and it's very difficult to get somebody who's already an adult, who's already playing at that elite level, to get accustomed to eye protection and still be able to perform at the level that they want. And that's why it'll never be adopted from the top down. If you're going to look at eye protection, if you look at all of the safety gear in the other sports, it always starts from the junior levels and working their way up to the professional levels. And that's why it takes years and years and years for that evolution in safety equipment to occur. So I think that while as ophthalmologists, we definitely should advocate for protective eyewear, I think we also have to realize that that's probably not going to be a immediate benefit. It won't be adopted in the near term. It is something that we need to continue to articulate, but we need to think of other strategies in the name of safety, as Dr. Cotter has mentioned. I think having some nail care standards is low-hanging fruit. It's really easy to enforce. It's really easy to set safety standards, and I think it's going to have a high impact. When we look at the eye injuries in the NBA, finger poke injuries causing corneal abrasions and other, eyelid lacerations, they're actually very common, and they have a strong economic impact on the team and for the players. So there's benefits all around to regulating this aspect of the game. There's other strategies as well, like perhaps bringing awareness to the officiating so that they can be more aware of the dangers of the hand motions and how close the hands are getting to the face and how they're officiating when players are in close contact with each other. But I think that, as Dr. Cotter has mentioned, this is really low-hanging fruit to focus on nail hygiene and setting some standards for safety.
And it seems like the athlete would accept this kind of safety monitoring. I only know from the high school level or very basic level, the refs would kind of check everyone's hands, make sure no one's wearing rings, bracelets when they're competing in the game. And so I'm not sure what it's like at the professional level, but I can imagine that there's some kind of examination that goes on to make sure everyone's on the same page. So this is something that could probably get sleeved into there pretty easily.
And then we're focusing on the WNBA for women, but actually, in the on the men's side as well, I think that there could be improvements in terms of managing nail hygiene to improve the safety standards there as well.
Right. It's interesting. You said it. You mentioned that. In the WNBA, they can't wear any necklaces. They can't wear any nose rings, no earrings, nothing no rings, nothing like that. When I can't think of a circumstance where those things would hurt anybody else, but they'll allow 3-inch nails. I mean, there's just no there's no sense in what. No one's really looking at that and saying, does all this make sense? I'd much rather see them allow somebody wear a necklace and get rid of those nails than the other way around.
I think the other thing that we, there in general, I think that many individuals involved in sports, whether it's the officials, whether it's the players, whether it's the coaches, perhaps they don't necessarily consider eye injuries to be that significant. I mean, it's different than tearing your ACL. And that's where I think we can have a huge impact by actually studying the injury patterns and producing data. If we have data to support our concerns about eye injuries, that gives us a little bit more leverage in terms of advocating for better safety standards.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard anecdotes of high-profile athletes, maybe in a playoff situation, they get a corneal abrasion, they have to sit out. And so the data could really provide some more power than just the anecdotes.
Correct.
Yeah, it reminds me in medical school of an anecdote. Where debating some, I can't remember what we were debating, but the analogy the professor used was, do we need to let somebody bleed and to prove that bleeding will cause death eventually, right? I mean, how much proof do we need that 2 or 3 inch nails is not a safe way to play defense in the WNBA? I mean, it's like, to me, that's like the bleeding argument, that that it should be obvious to everybody that that's unsafe. And I think it's inevitable we're going to see some injuries there, but the injuries we might not hear about are going to be at the lower levels if this really takes off. We'll see it in our clinics. Maybe we won't see it in the WNBA next year. I don't know, or maybe after that incident, maybe they'll start just self-regulating. But there ought to be some regulations laid down.
Switching gears a little bit, just to nail hygiene in general. I was reading an article or statement released from Marcin Gortat, kind of mentioning, hey, in practice, we need everyone's nails clipped, or else, it gets pretty physical, and you'll start bleeding. Dr. Yen, in your experience as a team physician, in practice, do they have more or less injuries compared to games, or is this something that needs to get focused on and improving the quality of safety during practice?
Well, I think without a doubt, there are more injuries when it's more competitive. So during games. In practice, it's probably a little bit more relaxed, and they're wearing different attire, so they're usually wearing more clothing during practice. But it's not to say that practice can't be competitive, and injuries do occur during practice as well. Actually, we just had a player who broke his hand during shoot around this morning, and how he's going to be out 4 to 8 weeks. So injuries can occur during practice as well.
John Shire, the coach of Duke, had a promising beginning to his NBA career. And in practice, as he was inbounding a ball, guy was guarding him and poked him in the eye with his finger, and he received an optic nerve avulsion, and it ended his NBA career from a finger poke in practice. So yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that doesn't get more play, about what fingers can do to the eye.
And as far as next steps forward, Dr. Yan, you mentioned kind of data that's needed as far as like characterizing the extent of injuries and kind of the impact of injuries. Can you kind of speak a little bit more to, what is needed out there for people that want to get involved?
Yeah, I think that we did our analysis, I think, of the 2017 or 2018 season. We looked at the number of eye injuries across the league. We characterized the injuries, how they occurred, what type of players, what type of plays they occurred in. And we also tried to correlate that with an economic impact and how much this was affecting the league and the team. And it's difficult to calculate the economic impact, but it's also not difficult to get up to a very big number in terms of economic impact, because there's so much money involved for the player salaries and for their performance as well. But I think that's what we need. We need to have more data demonstrating that eye injuries are significant, not just for visual safety and visual function, but that it has a greater impact on the performance of the team. And I think that's the avenue that we should take, because that's what's going to get people to listen.
Just out of curiosity, how do you come across that data set? Are you just like kind of searching, is there like an NBA trauma data set, or, what are you pulling it from?
Actually, every team is required to, report their injuries. I think it's part of their agreement, and especially as we get now into more sports betting, I think that being transparent about injuries is very important to the league, and they mandate that all the teams have to have an injury report before every game, after every game. So it's actually publicly available. Multiple websites from these sports websites or fantasy websites. You can look up the injury reports on every single team, every single player. And then we were able to actually view the injuries that were reported with the NBA League Pass, which allows you to watch every single game that's available with a subscription.
So even if it just says, eye injury, you could maybe go back and kind of see, oh, what happened? What does it kind of look like?
Yeah, and then it's also corroborating, what's reported with, other information, news reports, and as to getting further clarification.
Dr. Cotter, any comment here?
Only what's the end game here? I mean, I think we're going to get this car done, get the Academy of Ophthalmology behind us. Maybe we'll get the the pediatric ophthalmologists behind us. We'll get as many organizations as possible. And then hopefully, with the weight of the AAO behind us, we can send out another press release and try to get the podcasters involved. There's, 3 or 4 podcasters who do nothing but basketball, and even some of the ones who are mostly basketball, who are widely watched. If we can just penetrate that, because there was a lot of chatter on the podcast and YouTube after this incident with Caitlin Clark, and there was 2 or 3 day buzz where they were discussing why they have these nails in the WNBA. But it's NFL playoffs, it's college football now, and everybody's attention is turned away from that. I think once the WNBA comes back into season and everybody focuses on that, like there's really no other sport in May that anybody cares much about. I mean, maybe the NBA at the end finals, but May, June, July is pretty slow time for sports. And the WNBA, look at the NBA last year. I mean, they're outdrawing the NBA on TV. So I think there'll be an opportunity once the AAO acts on this to get some publicity, and then that will pressure the WNBA, maybe the NBA, and maybe the NCAA too, to enact some regulations. That would be a big victory for us if we can do that.
Actually, I think a bigger end game is, and why I think kind of being out here talking about it is important, is actually just having more awareness. If we can get more awareness and more people talking about it, then that's where, the more people that talk about it, the more it's going to be on the tip of someone's mind when they're watching the games, and that's how we can affect change. If it's just a few people, like just the 3 of us talking about it, it's going to be very difficult to get traction. But if we can get the greater ophthalmic community, the greater eye care community, the medical community, the sports community talking about it, being aware of the hazards here of finger poke injuries, hopefully awareness will lead to change.
And I think that plays a role just in eye protection in general and just, eye injuries in general. I think many athletes, especially at the lower competition levels, don't really understand the likelihood of injury or, how often these injuries are happening, and that risk that is inherent to all sports, but what is the actual risk of them, stepping on the floor. And that's hard for a high school athlete to really grasp. But as we, promote awareness of this issue as well as other issues, that they might come to accept that a little bit more.
Yeah, I can't think of anything in the sports world now more egregious than 3-inch fingernails playing basketball. I mean, I cannot. I mean, it's just. I mean, look at the. I mean, the concussions and all get a lot of play, and rightfully so in football. But they've done a lot, and they're continuing to do a lot. But this is just so egregious. Anyway, so hopefully, but this podcast is just one example of the things we need to do, and hopefully we get a lot more podcasters talking about this.
So besides getting people talking about it, anything else that our listeners can do to kind of spread the word, or and any other advice for people to help get involved with this?
If anybody has any connections to the media, let us know, because if I could just get, I tried to get the media in Indianapolis because that was probably the most focus in that town, and I just haven't been able to break through yet. But yeah, any influential members of the media, if anybody has contact with them, yeah, we would love to talk to them and just get them on board because I think media is going to be the key.
Yeah, I would go back to what was mentioned earlier. If we can get like listeners, if we can get residents and fellows and students to be looking at and doing research on the injury patterns more and getting more publications, more presentations, the
Right.
more visibility we put on eye injuries, I think that's going to bring greater awareness and hopefully influence our organizations like the American Academy of Ophthalmology or the Pediatric Ophthalmology or the Pediatric Association.
Before we sign off, we ask all our guests, we'll start with Dr. Cotter. What's your favorite sport, and do you have a favorite sports team?
Yeah, I got a lot of favorite sports. I guess tennis and golf is pretty much a tie. I play a lot of both of them. Favorite team. I mean, I got to say this, not politically correct, but the Washington Redskins. I mean, I grew up just an avid, Sonny Jurgensen fan, Charlie Taylor, Bobby Mitchell. It's kind of faded in recent years. I don't watch as much pro football, but when it comes to college football, my son went to Penn State, and they're in the college semifinals right now, and so we're debating whether we're going to go down for the semifinals or not. But so yeah, Penn State football, Washington Redskins, and golf and tennis.
There you go. Dr. Yen?
My favorite sport's probably going to be golf. I'm not a very good golfer, but I love being out there playing golf and watching golf. My daughter plays golf in college, so I love watching her play as well.
Does
In
she?
terms of team sports, well, I grew up in Michigan, and I grew up a Wolverine fan. I grew up a University of Michigan fan, and I haven't lived in Michigan for over 20 years, or actually over 30 years now, but I'm still a Michigan fan.
Yeah. If Ohio State wins the national championship, they're still not going to live down losing to Michigan this year.
Yeah,
I mean,
3 years.
3 years, right.
Yeah, good tail end of the year to be a Michigan fan, right?
Right.
It was a good start to the 2024, and it's a pretty good finish as well.
Yeah,
There you
Alabama
go.
The
and
middle
Ohio
could have been
State.
better.
Right.
Thank you for listening to Sports Ophthalmology. To stay connected and learn more, you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and at our website, sportsophthalmology.com.